Welcome everyone. Welcome to Conversations on Empathy Centric Design. This is the premiere episode of our live conversations series where we delve into the heart of Empathy Centric Design within the field of HCI, human-computer interaction. The conversation series aims to bring together researchers from various academic and industry backgrounds to examine the trends, drawbacks, and ethos of empathy as a design principle for HCI and adjacent disciplines. Today, we are starting at this episode how empathy shapes the interaction between humans and technology, transforming user experiences and pushing the boundaries of digital design. And our first distinguished guests, Tiffanie and Michal, and both are actually UX researcher at Google. We will unravel the evolution, challenges, and future of empathic design through a series of thought-provoking discussions, I hope, in the industry, in the academia. And this series aims to foster a multidisciplinary dialogue, shedding light on the pivotal role of empathy in HCI and beyond. And so whether you are a designer, researcher, and enthusiast, we invite you to engage with us as we explore the depth and impact of the empathy in the digital age. So I am introducing our distinguished guest and the member of the EmpathiCH team. The first participant in this series is the conversation between Tiffanie Horne and Michal Lahav. Welcome, and this stage is yours.
Great, thank you so much. So I'll just start with a quick intro. Hi, everyone. I am Tiffanie Horne. I'm a user experience researcher on the Google search team. And, my research interests are HCI, speech and language technologies, and artificial intelligence in information experiences. I have a particular interest, or I should say that I'm a researcher trying to understand underserved and historically marginalized users' lives and needs, so that we can create products that work better for them. And so we have the pleasure of being joined by Michal. Hi, Michal.
Hello, I'm Michal Lahav. I'm also a staff user researcher at Google Research. That's the corner of Google that I'm in, Google Research. And my interests include HCI approaches to generative AI. I've been working a lot on AI memory, collaborative AI, and assistive speech technologies. And my interests are in supporting global perspectives. So I try to get out of the office and into the field as much as I can, and also instituting community-based research approaches, helping AI be more equitable for underrepresented communities. I'm so happy to be here. So let's get started. Tiffanie, could you share your perspective on the role of empathy in design of human-computer interactions and how it influences user experience?
Yeah, sure. So my view is that empathy is a discourse, and it's not always easy. Empathy, it's not a fixed or static concept, but rather a dynamic and ongoing conversation or dialogue. Even among us, there's a diversity of perspectives and approaches to empathy, which can, vary depending on the context and the individuals involved. Let me share an example from my own experience. I once had this opportunity to lead the design of a course tailored for cross-functional team members. And so during which we encountered a significant disagreement, among us course designers regarding what's the best approach to teach empathy. And some advocated for the training to, imaginatively put themselves in the shoes of others, while the others argued for the training to take a more direct approach involving engaging with people, with their real life scenarios, going out and talking directly to the users themselves. So we're seeing incorporating empathy in a practice that's complex because there are diverse viewpoints surrounding its application in research and design processes. It became evident to me that empathy is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Rather it requires ongoing reflection, negotiation, and adaptation to effectively address diverse perspectives and experiences of users and team members alike. And so when I say that empathy is dialogue, it's not just a skill or a technique, but a broader discourse that encompasses philosophical, ethical, and practical considerations. It requires that we critically examine our assumptions, and that, really we must examine our biases and our power dynamics inherent in empathy-centric practices. Ultimately, we seek out, ways to foster forms of empathy that are authentic to us. So Michal, of course, the challenge in any real world setting is how to translate these broad ideals into our actual practices. When conducting research in industry, how have you incorporated empathy into research design for understanding user needs and behavior?
Yeah, so in industry, I think of it as my primary job to advocate and be the voice of the user. And I do this so that these multidisciplinary teams of like managers and designers and engineers can resonate with people using the products and build empathy so that they really understand the needs of those users more effectively. So trying to go beyond just traditional research methods by really focusing on observation and on engagement with the users, hopefully, ideally in their natural environments. And the hope is to uncover these sort of subtle, unarticulated needs and pain points so that they can really start to build empathy. And there are different ways to make this happen. One strategy is to literally have those multidisciplinary team members just come and physically observe the research sessions so that they can pay attention to those emotional responses and the more sort of intangible attributes of users using the product to really see and experience how users feel. Another strategy is with presentation of my findings or our findings with the research. I try to amplify the voice of the user in every way I can, by sharing quotes, videos, making sure that their voice is as tangible as possible. Tiffanie and I, we were both part of a study that involved recruiting participants with speech impairments. And for this project, we really needed to build empathy on multiple levels. We needed to build our own researcher empathy for the population. And the strategy we used was working with speech and language pathologists to really understand the needs of those users. And then to build the empathy in our broader team, we emphasized the assumptions that we needed to break in order to design experiences for those people with speech impairments. For example, when conducting sessions, making sure that the participants were really first very physically comfortable. This is something that in traditional user research approaches, you don't really attend to the physical comfort of your participants, but really taking time when conducting the session to build a rapport with the participants. And just we even got the scoop on who the participants were, what their interests were from the speech language pathologists before we even started the research. So we had a chance to really connect with the participants before even starting and diving into the research. Also, just in terms of the nuts and bolts of the research, slowing down our own speech to the rate of the slowest speaker, taking lots of breaks in the session. So all of these strategies really helped our whole team be present for the sessions, and they started to more intimately observe users and discover the needs that users themselves might not even be aware of. So this can sort of lead to more innovative solutions and improvements to products that you don't necessarily expect.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. It sounds like you really make sure that the voice of the user is as tangible as possible, and beginning with the connection with participants in sessions all the way to sharing that with decision makers. This focus makes me curious about specific situations. Can you discuss a time when empathic design led to unexpected insights or innovations in your work?
Yeah, on that same project with users with speech impairments, some of our participants had cognitive disabilities. And we realized as we were running these sessions that our standard user research practices of research were not going to be successful working with this population. For one, in a typical user research session, the researcher is advised to be very neutral and very unemotional, and try to not bias the user to, if they're testing out a product, you don't want to bias them for if they're doing a good job or not. Whereas with this particular population of people with cognitive disabilities, the speech language pathologists really encouraged us to encourage the participants and create engagement and active support throughout the session, which is very different than our typical practices. So saying like, good job, or you got this, or thank you, you're doing great. And we saw this sort of unravel and unfold more open participants immediately and more engaged participants. So it was so helpful to have that bit of information. And so Tiffanie and I, mid session, started to change our practices, and we developed a method called the scaffolding method. That is a technique that essentially uses empathy as its core principle. So what you do in the scaffolding method is it's essentially layering understanding and gently and gradually scaffolding information as the user is testing a product. So typically we just say, okay, test this out and tell us what you think. Whereas in the scaffolding method, you show one little element at a time, and then you build understanding verbally or with gestures along the way, assess understanding for each little individual layer. And sometimes you even add information. So that was unexpected, came out of our work, and really uses empathy in its core. I'll turn the table to you, Tiffanie. So are there examples you can share from a project, perhaps adaptations made to meet our participants where they were at?
Sure. Yeah, I can chime in. Yeah, building on sharing about the project you just mentioned, I found that from my pre-Google background in K through 12 special education, that was especially helpful in that project. I knew that big adaptations would give our participant an opportunity to share deeply, but specifically creating like a study protocol that considered their needs and their abilities. And a couple of things that were helpful that we did was reduce the number of questions, making the questions that were the highest priority come first, and using a reserve to hold additional questions. If our participants completed things faster than expected, it was important to be able to have breaks, to have flexibility in our time, but also important to kind of gather, the most important insights. And then we removed the literacy barriers and prioritized their reading comfort. We offered to read text aloud. We said things like, you can read or I can read each question aloud. Which do you prefer? And really kind of focused on like a preference there, and not just one time, but throughout the session, because over time, exhaustion could kick in, and also, things could change. So even down to that level. So I'd also say that the scaffolding method was reminiscent of a technique with the same name that we used, in school buildings to meet students where they were at, to progressively give more challenging tasks, but providing support along the way. And, the truth of the matter is that a core component of empathy is really about meeting people, where they're at.
Yeah, thank you. What methodologies do you employ to ensure empathetic design?
Methodologies, yeah. So in our role as researchers, I'd say that we engage with numerous users, listening to their stories and observing their interactions with our products. And so while we can't really fully embody their experiences, we do absorb a great deal. And personally, I find it valuable to advocate for what I've witnessed, and what users likely desire, from what they tell us in cross-functional meetings. While presenting findings is essential, I've discovered greater impact in product decisions when I speak up as an expert, drawing from, my empathic understanding of how users engage with our products. This allows me to collaborate effectively with engineers, with product managers, data scientists, proposing solutions based on user insights. Sometimes it's evident that users are missing certain features or they have expressed specific deeper needs. And other times data may suggest an opportunity, but users' sentiments tells us a different story. So in these cases, I advocate for careful consideration, recognizing that users' experiences can be nuanced and may warrant that we more closely examine this. So that's kind of one way I leverage empathy to influence decision-making processes, that I bring user empathy to other decision makers, and I bridge that gap between users' needs and product development by providing insights and perspectives that are grounded in genuine user interactions. And another thing is, I really open up with sessions like my user experience research sessions by inviting other stakeholders to listen in. One thing I've been loving about when I do, for example, focus groups, is that it's a lot of bang for the hour. So there's like 5 to 7 people that we're hearing their perspectives on. So if I get a stakeholder to listen into half an hour of that or an hour of that, and then I can debrief the insights with them, they've likely become a bit supercharged with empathy. And I think that it's a little bit harder to invite stakeholders to each session. They would need to kind of consolidate their thinking if you have 8 sessions stacked up in one day or across a couple of days. But I do also invite stakeholders to listen in on individual sessions to hear directly from users themselves.
So for the public, we talk about stakeholders as these important people. And the reason why is because without them, all of our research would come to nothing. We have to have, in order to affect change, we have to have their involvement and their buy-in and their engagement. And so they're a really important element of this whole big picture of empathy, because in order for them to enact change, they need to really get the user and put themselves in the shoes of the user. I remember one study where I literally had, for each participant, I had a different person in the room, stakeholder, taking the notes. And so they were responsible for delivering me with the notes, and that really helped. So at least each person could sort of speak to one participant and really know them really well. And that was really helpful.
Yeah, I really value that kind of engagement and involvement. Michal, can you talk a little bit about, so we're in this world, right? This digital interaction world. How do you see the role of empathy in designing for digital interactions, especially in creating experiences that resonate with users on an emotional, or experiential level?
Yeah, so great question. We're seeing so much generative AI, and it's really shifting the paradigm of how we interact with all these knowledge systems. So one of the most prevalent findings that has come out of this last year of research is this real need to use AI as a safe and non-judgmental space. We saw this in studies with English as a second language participants, where people really needed to practice and make mistakes with an AI without having it judge them. And this kind of leverages the non-human, non-judgmental aspects of AI, making it the safe place to practice. We also heard these sentiments echoed in studies with users who live with dyslexia. Many of them had to often turn to friends or family when they were writing essays or emails. And this was a huge social burden to have to bother someone to correct and write their writing. So the AI gave them this opportunity to just practice and correct and reorient their writing without this fear of being judged. Finally, another signal came. We did a huge global study this year on mental models of AI internationally, and especially in Japan, we heard these sentiments again and again. I want to be open with the AI. People seem to want to share themselves with the AI to get proposals of how to live a better life. And so I see this as a real opportunity to leverage AI as this empathetic container, and it's kind of this unique advantage of the non-human quality, and form empathetic designs that are really interesting and kind of a new frontier for the technology.
Yeah.
What challenges, speaking of challenges, what challenges have you encountered in integrating empathy into the design process, Tiffanie?
Yeah, that's a great question. With these opportunities in mind, there are also challenges. Well, for me, I can speak to like empathic design requires a solid infrastructure. That's really important. It must be deeply integrated into your operations, not just taken as small steps either. Therefore, I've contributed to building this infrastructure here in my role, including setting parameters such as demographic targets to enhance research inclusivity. It's crucial to examine the research structure, not just the individual studies, considering like the overall research infrastructure. So start that by assessing the composition of your research pool. Where are your participants located? How diverse are they? Are they rural participants that are going to be included? Interviewing only individuals from Silicon Valleys or other tech hubs, really lacks diversity and limits perspectives. And this is not limited to the United States. We're collaborating globally. So working with third parties is an area of infrastructure where it's important to have partners with shared values, and that demonstrate the ability to execute and deliver on those shared experiences. For example, when working with vendors or partners that pledge diversity but don't deliver, I've had experiences in circumstances where, up front we talk about the importance and also the need for delivering diversity within our research, but not being able to deliver on that. So this underscores the importance of solid infrastructure. And now, we're doing things like partnering with companies like Dope Labs, who stated mission aligns with empathic research design and kind of ensures that reliable diversity. And so that's one way that we can kind of overcome the challenges of just conducting research on a mass scale with empathy centered and focused in the middle. Yeah, so speaking of methodologies, Michal, what methodologies do you employ to ensure empathic design? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So in industry, it's very common to conduct research very quickly. That you're just trying to get to the heart of what you're testing because you're working within all these product timelines. And one of the things that I have been trying to institute at Google is more community-based participatory design. So these practices really involve bringing long-term trusted connections with communities. And this is in contrast with the typical research practices where we parachute in, we get information, and we leave. In community-based participatory practices, you're creating this community-centered and mutual relationship in all areas of the research process. So you're co-creating research questions. You're deciding together how the research is even conducted, co-publishing findings, even what kind of incentives the community is being is receiving. So the community is a true, valued, equal partner in the whole research process. And we've been so lucky to be able to engage in these kinds of community-based research practices in our work. Creating more equitable speech technologies was one of the big projects that involved community design, as well as studies around immigrant machine translation work also involved community design. So this is very hard to do, and it's not popular in the industry. But the hope is just to keep educating people about that this is possible. And the more that people know about it, then it's more normalized and then more supported in the whole infrastructure of the company. And we continue to lobby for these practices. So small changes. back to you, Tiffanie. How can we navigate the ethical considerations of empathic design, especially when aiming to design inclusively and avoid biases?
Yeah. One way that we can navigate these ethical considerations is having diverse researchers on staff and leading projects. As we engage people in discussions about design and its value in their lives, creating spaces for psychological safety is imperative. This entails having interview facilitators, moderators who share backgrounds and identities with users. It's crucial to have a diverse team of researchers. I think the way that this connects back to empathy is that empathy is also being able to understand what people don't say. So, one thing you have to understand with marginalized people is that they have become used to becoming marginalized, like a kind of tolerating. So the fact that somebody doesn't say something or doesn't say it in the way that you would say it if you weren't happy with the design doesn't mean that it's not an uncomfortable experience for them. Or frankly, they may have just grown calloused and put up with inconveniences that others just wouldn't do. For example, thinking about Black women having to refine their searches more than others when searching for hair care products that meet their specific needs. They may be less reluctant to reveal the frustration with a researcher with whom they don't feel that they can relate to, or this disparate experience may be so common for them that they have become numb to it. And this is just one example. So I think it's important that there's a diverse team of researchers because they would be more likely to create a safe space and draw out, what would otherwise not be said from a participant in a study. That's just one. There's many other ways, but yeah, I think that's one way to get to the ethical considerations.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that really important point out. So I think now it is 10. Wow, look at us. 10 o'clock. Perfectly on the hour. We will now turn it over to...
Thank you so much to Michal and Tiffanie. And it was very, very delightful conversation. And thank you for the all the insights and all the questions for today. And have a nice evening and have a nice day.
Thank you so much for inviting us.